The girl fell face first into the snow for the third time, and this time she didn't get up. Her small fingers stayed locked around the baby in her arms, even as her broken leg dragged a trail of blood across the white ground. 9 years old, exposed to 18 degrees below zero. Still crawling toward a fence line she couldn't see through the blizzard. Elijah Hartwell had buried one daughter 15 years ago. He swore he'd never let himself care about another child again. But when that little girl whispered, "Please don't let the waterman find us," something inside him shattered. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story travels. The wind hit like a fist that February night in 1881. Elijah Hartwell pulled his collar higher and urged his mare forward along the fence line. Belle knew this routine better than he did. 13 years of riding together through Wyoming winters had taught her when to push and when to wait. Easy girl. He ran a gloved hand along her neck. 3 more miles, then hot mash in a warm barn. Belle's ears flicked toward the pine grove to the east. She stopped dead. What is it? The mare wouldn't move. Elijah had learned to trust her instincts more than his own. He sat perfectly still in the saddle, straining to hear over the howling wind. Nothing. Then faint, almost swallowed by the storm, a baby crying. Jesus Christ! He spurred Belle toward the sound. Ice-laden branches slapped against his face as he pushed through the tree line. His heart hammered against his ribs. No baby should be out here. Hell no, living thing should be out in weather that could kill a man in 20 minutes flat. The trees opened into a small clearing. That's when he saw her. A little girl, maybe 9 years old, crawling through snow that came up to her chest. Her right leg dragged behind her at an angle that made Elijah's stomach clench. Behind her, wrapped in what had once been a blue wool coat, she pulled a bundle. The bundle was making the crying sounds. "Lord have mercy!" The girl fell forward, face first into the snow. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then her small hands pushed against the ground. She lifted herself up, adjusted her grip on the bundle, kept crawling. She was heading somewhere specific, Elijah realized, not wandering, moving with purpose toward his fence line, toward his land. The second time she collapsed, she stayed down longer. Her breath came in visible puffs that seemed to be getting smaller and farther apart. When she finally struggled back to her hands and knees, Elijah noticed something clutched in her right hand. A piece of wood, maybe 2 feet long, carved with notches. She wouldn't let go of it, even though her fingers had turned white, even though holding it made crawling through the snow that much harder. The third time she fell maybe 50 yards from where Elijah sat frozen in his saddle, she didn't get up. The bundle in her arms stopped making noise. That silence broke whatever spell had held him motionless. "Yeah!" Belle lunged through the drifts. Snow flew from her hooves. Elijah dismounted before she'd fully stopped, his boots sinking past his knees. Up close, the child looked worse than he'd thought. Her lips were blue, her small hands blackened at the fingertips. He knelt beside her. "Child, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. Brown eyes, the color of rich coffee, but old eyes. Eyes that belonged on a woman of 40, not a child of 9. She tried to focus on his face. "Don't let him find us." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, don't let the waterman find us." Who's the waterman? But her hand had gone limp around that notched wooden stick. Her eyes closed. For one terrifying moment, Elijah thought he was too late. Then he saw the slight rise and fall of her chest. With trembling hands, he unwrapped the bundle she'd been dragging. A baby boy, maybe 16 months old. Dark hair curling against his skull. Skin gray from the cold. The child was barely breathing. Elijah had seen enough dying men at Antietam and Gettysburg to know the difference between mostly dead and all dead. These children were mostly dead, which meant they could still be saved.
1.
The ride back to the ranch house was the longest of Elijah's life. He held the girl against his chest with one arm, the baby tucked inside his sheepskin coat, against his heart. Every step Belle took made the girl whimper. "Stay with me," he kept saying. "Both of you. Stay with me." The ranch house glowed golden in the distance. Elijah kicked the kitchen door open without ceremony. Consuela Reyes looked up from the stove. One glance at the children in his arms, and she was already moving. "Dios mío, put them on the table. Rosa, all the blankets from upstairs. Now." She cleared the big wooden table with one arm, while reaching for the children with the other. "How long were they outside?" "Don't know. Found them in the pine grove east of Section 12. Consuela's experienced hands moved over the girl's body. Her face went pale when she saw the leg. "This is bad. Bone through the skin." She used Elijah's skinning knife to cut away the frozen clothing. The fabric crackled like old paper. "And look here." She pointed to the girl's forearms. Circular burns, maybe a dozen of them, some pink and new, others silvery white with age. "Cigarette burns," Consuela said quietly. She crossed herself. "Someone has been hurting this child for a long time." Elijah felt something cold settle in his chest. "You sure?" "I raised 7 children, Elijah. I know the difference between accidents and cruelty." She continued cutting away the clothing. The coat's lining had been carefully opened and crudely resewn with coarse horsehair thread. Something had been hidden inside. "Get Doc Pruitt," Consuela ordered. "This little one's breathing is too shallow, and that leg needs more skill than I have." Elijah didn't waste time with questions. He grabbed Thunder from the barn and rode back into the storm. Doc Nathaniel Pruitt was exactly where Elijah expected to find him, playing 5-card stud at Sullivan's saloon. The old physician took one look at Elijah's face and folded his cards. "How bad?" 2 children. Compound fracture. Hypothermia. Maybe worse." Doc Pruitt grabbed his medical bag from behind the bar. "Lead the way." They rode hard despite the treacherous conditions. By the time they reached the ranch house, Consuela had worked what miracles she could. The children were positioned near the kitchen fire, wrapped in every blanket in the house. The baby was crying again, weak but persistent. "Good sign," Doc Pruitt said, examining the infant with practiced efficiency. "Crying means the lungs are working. This little fellow is going to make it." The girl was conscious now. Her teeth chattered violently, but her eyes followed every movement in the room. "What's your name, child?" Doc Pruitt asked gently. "Clara." Her voice was hoarse. "Clara Dawson. That's my brother Samuel." "And where do you live, Clara? Where are your folks?" Terror flashed across her face. She tried to sit up despite her injuries, reaching frantically for the wooden stick Consuela had placed beside her. "Don't tell him we're here. Please, he'll kill us both. He'll kill Samuel just like he killed Mama." Doc Pruitt caught Elijah's eye. They shared a look that said this was about much more than children lost in a storm. "Nobody's going to hurt you here," Elijah said, moving closer so Clara could see his face. "This is my home, and you're under my protection. But I need to set that leg, and I won't lie, it's going to hurt something fierce." Clara examined his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she reached out and took his hand. "I know it's going to hurt. Everything hurts now." Her fingers tightened around his. "Just don't let go of me. When Mama set my arm that time, she held my hand the whole time. It helped." So Elijah held her small hand in both of his, while Doc Pruitt worked to clean and set the compound fracture. Consuela stood at Clara's head, singing a Spanish lullaby in a voice soft as summer rain, trying to drown out the necessary sounds of bone being set and flesh being sewn. Clara screamed twice, but she never tried to pull her hand away from Elijah's grip. When it was over, Doc Pruitt wiped his instruments clean with whiskey. "You're the bravest young lady I've ever had the privilege to doctor," he said. "That leg should heal straight if you stay off it for the next month." Clara's eyelids were growing heavy from the laudanum, but just before she drifted off, she started talking. Words tumbled out like water through a broken dam. Water rights 1861, Willow Creek, senior claim, Hartwell and Dawson, joint filing, document 247B. Elijah's breath caught. "Mama made me memorize all of it," Clara mumbled. "She said if anything happened, I should find the territorial judge. She said the paper would save us." Her small hand tightened around that notched wooden stick one more time, then gradually relaxed as sleep took her. Doc Pruitt finished cleaning his instruments. "What do you make of that?" Elijah picked up the wooden stick and examined it in the lamplight. Old, worn smooth by decades of use. Along one edge, careful notches had been carved at precise intervals. "Water rights," he said slowly. "This is a water gauge stick. My grandfather had one exactly like it when he first settled this land back in '61. He studied it more carefully. The earliest date he could make out was 1861. If this is real," Doc Pruitt said, reading over his shoulder, "it predates every other water claim in the valley. And whoever controls senior rights to Willow Creek controls the future of every ranch from here to the railroad." Before Elijah could say more, they heard horses outside. Lots of horses. Moving fast. Consuela moved to the window. "Sheriff's coming, and he's not alone." Elijah walked to the door and pulled it open. Sheriff Josiah Brennan sat his horse at the front of what looked like half the town. Torches and lanterns cast dancing shadows across the snow. Beside the sheriff, mounted on a fine black stallion, sat a younger man Elijah recognized from around town. Silas Blackwood. Maybe 38 years old, expensive wool coat, beaver hat. The kind of man who had money and wanted everyone to know it. Blackwood pointed directly at Elijah's front door. "That's where they are, Sheriff. That old hermit has my wife's children." Sheriff Brennan sighed heavily. He pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. "Mr. Hartwell, I've got guardianship papers here signed by Territorial Judge Harding. Says Silas Blackwood is the legal guardian of Clara and Samuel Dawson. I'm going to need you to turn those children over." Behind him, Elijah heard Clara whimper in her sleep. Blackwood smiled. Something in that smile made Elijah's skin crawl. "Now see here, Sheriff," Elijah said, stepping onto the porch. "That little girl has a broken leg that was deliberately snapped. She's covered in cigarette burns. She's terrified of this man." "That's ridiculous," Blackwood said quickly. "Clara's always been clumsy, prone to accidents. Accidents don't leave cigarette burns in neat rows up a child's arms." Sheriff Brennan's jaw tightened. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Hartwell, but the law is clear. Mr. Blackwood has legal custody." "Give me 72 hours, Elijah said. "The girl needs medical attention. Doc Pruitt says moving her now could kill her." The sheriff considered this. A dead child would raise questions nobody wanted to answer. 72 hours, he said finally. "But Mr. Hartwell, if you interfere with the legal transfer after that, I'll arrest you for kidnapping." Blackwood's smile disappeared. "Sheriff, I really don't think—" 72 hours, Mr. Blackwood. We'll return Thursday at noon." As the sheriff turned his horse to leave, Blackwood leaned forward and spoke directly to Elijah. His voice was quiet, cold. "Enjoy these 3 days, old man. Because when I get those children back, accidents have a way of happening, especially to children who talk too much." Then the whole group was riding away, their torches disappearing into the distance. Elijah stood alone on his porch with the wind and the snow and the weight of what he'd gotten himself into. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen, watching Clara and baby Samuel breathe, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Consuela made coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. They drank it in silence while the hours crawled toward dawn. "You're thinking about Hannah," Consuela said finally. Elijah didn't answer. He didn't have to. Hannah, his daughter, dead 15 years now. drowned in the creek while he was fixing fence 100 yards away. He'd heard her calling for him, but by the time he reached the water, she was gone. 7 years old. The same age Clara was when someone first held a cigarette to her skin. "This is different," Consuela said gently. "Is it?" "Hannah's death was an accident. What's happening to Clara is evil. And you can stop it. I couldn't save my own daughter. What makes you think I can save someone else's?" Consuela set down her coffee cup. "Because God doesn't give us the same test twice, Elijah. He gives us the chance to get it right." As the first gray light crept across the mountains, Clara began to stir. Her brown eyes opened slowly. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, testing for danger. Then her gaze found Elijah. "You stayed," she whispered. "I stayed." "Nobody ever stays." Something cracked open in Elijah's chest. Something that had been locked away for 15 years. "I'm staying now." Clara studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out her small hand. Elijah took it. "Mama told me about your grandfather," Clara said. "She said Ezra Hartwell and Abraham Dawson were friends. They filed their water claims together, built their houses together, promised to look after each other's families. My grandfather never mentioned that. Maybe he didn't want anyone to know. Maybe he was protecting us." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "Mama said the water rights belonged to both families, forever. That's why Mr. Blackwood killed her. He wants the water." "How much is it worth?" "The railroad man said $25,000. Elijah whistled low. That was more money than most men saw in a lifetime. "But that's not the worst part," Clara said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mama found papers in Mr. Blackwood's coat. Contracts with the railroad. They planned it all before he even married her. Where are these papers now?" "Mama copied them, word for word. She hid the copies somewhere safe." "Where, Clara?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "She wouldn't tell me. She said if I didn't know Mr. Blackwood couldn't make me tell. She said the papers would save us, but she died before she could show me where." Baby Samuel began to cry. Consuela lifted him from his basket, cooing softly in Spanish. Clara watched her brother with the fierce protectiveness of someone who had been his only shield for months. "I almost didn't make it," she said quietly. "When Mr. Blackwood broke my leg, I thought it was over. But then I thought about Samuel, about what would happen to him if I gave up. So you crawled 3 miles through a blizzard with a broken leg and a baby in your arms. I didn't have a choice." Elijah looked at this 9-year-old girl who had shown more courage than most grown men he'd known. "You always have a choice, Clara. You chose to fight, you chose to survive. That's not nothing." Clara's tears spilled over. "But I couldn't save Mama. I was right there. I saw him push her into the well, and I just hid behind the woodpile and watched her die. You were 8 years old. I should have done something. What you did was survive. What you did was protect your brother. What you did was carry evidence that could hang the man who killed your mother." Elijah squeezed her hand gently. "Your mama would be proud of you, Clara. I'm proud of you." For the first time since he'd found her in the snow, Clara smiled. It was small and fragile, like the first flower of spring pushing through frozen ground. "Do you think we can stop him, Mr. Blackwood, I mean? He has money. He has lawyers. He has the sheriff on his side." Elijah thought about the guardianship papers, about the wealth and power Silas Blackwood could bring to bear, about the 72 hours ticking away like a death sentence. Then he thought about Hannah, about the second chance Consuela said God was giving him. "I don't know if we can stop him," he said honestly, "but I know we're going to try." Clara nodded slowly. "Mama used to say that trying is all we can do. The rest is up to God." "Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. She was beautiful too, and kind. She only married Mr. Blackwood because she thought Samuel and I needed a father. She was trying to protect you. I know. That's what makes it worse. Clara's voice cracked. She loved us so much, she died for us. And now Mr. Blackwood gets to walk around free while she's buried in the cold ground. Elijah had no words for that. Some grief was too big for comfort. So he just held her hand and let her cry. After a while, Clara's tears slowed. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mr. Hartwell. Call me Elijah. Elijah. She tested the name. What happened to your family? Consuela said you live alone. The question hit like a knife between the ribs. I had a wife once, Sarah. She died in childbirth while I was away at war. And your daughter? Elijah's throat tightened. Hannah. She drowned when she was 7. I was supposed to be watching her, but I was fixing fence. By the time I heard her calling, he couldn't finish. Clara's small hand squeezed his. I'm sorry, she said simply. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, Elijah thought. It doesn't. They sat in silence as the morning sun filled the kitchen with golden light. Samuel had fallen back asleep in Consuela's arms. The fire crackled softly. For the first time in 15 years, the silence in Elijah's house didn't feel empty. It felt like something was beginning. The sound of hoofbeats shattered the morning peace. Consuela moved to the window. It's Doc Pruitt, and he's riding hard. Elijah opened the door as the physician reined his horse to a stop. We've got a problem, Doc Pruitt said without dismounting. I went to check the land office records this morning. That water rights certificate, it's real. Filed June 10, 1861. Ezra Hartwell and Abraham Dawson. Senior priority throughout the Willow Creek watershed. That's good news. That's not all. Doc Pruitt's face was grim. I also found out what those rights are really worth. The railroad isn't paying $25,000 for water access. They're paying $250,000. Elijah felt the blood drain from his face. $250,000. The Union Pacific is building their main water depot right here. Every train crossing the continent will need to refill in this valley. Without senior water rights, they'd have to reroute 200 miles south. Clara had pushed herself up on her elbows, listening intently. That's why he did it, she said quietly. That's why Mr. Blackwood spent 2 years courting Mama. That's why he killed her when she wouldn't sign the papers. Doc Pruitt finally dismounted. There's more. I ran into Sheriff Brennan in town. He's already asking questions about Margaret's death. The story Blackwood told that she died from complications after childbirth doesn't hold water. Samuel was born in March. Margaret died in September. 6 months apart, Elijah said. Exactly. No doctor would believe that timeline, which means the death certificate was falsified. Can we prove it? Maybe. The doctor who signed it, Dr. Hayes, left town the day after Margaret died, but I have contacts in California. If he's still alive, I can find him. Elijah looked at Clara. The girl's face had gone pale, but her jaw was set with determination. There's something else, Clara said slowly. Something I didn't tell you before. What is it? The night before Mama died, she made me memorize something. Not just the water rights. Something else. What? Clara closed her eyes, concentrating. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. September 15th, 1881. Storage room. Church of the Sacred Heart. Wooden box. Cross on the lid. Doc Pruitt leaned forward. Your mother hid evidence in the church. She said if anything happened to her, I should tell someone I trusted. Someone who would know what to do. Elijah and Doc Pruitt exchanged glances. The Church of the Sacred Heart was only 2 miles away. If Margaret Dawson had hidden evidence of Blackwood's conspiracy there, it could be the key to everything. But it could also be a trap. Blackwood's men are watching the ranch, Elijah said. If we try to reach the church, they'll follow us. Then we wait until dark. Doc Pruitt suggested. We don't have time. The 72 hours are already ticking, Clara spoke up from the table. There's a back trail through the timber. Papa used to take me hunting that way. It comes out behind the church on the far side from town. Can you draw me a map? I can do better than that. Clara's eyes met his steadily. I can show you. Out of the question. Your leg. My leg will heal. Samuel won't if Mr. Blackwood gets his hands on him. Clara's voice was fierce. I've been protecting my brother since Mama died. I'm not going to stop now. Elijah looked at this 9-year-old girl who had crawled through a blizzard with a broken leg, who had watched her mother die and kept fighting, who was willing to risk everything to save her baby brother. He thought about Hannah, about the choice he hadn't been able to make 15 years ago. All right, he said finally. But we do this my way, and the first sign of trouble you let me handle it. Clara nodded. Yes, sir. And Clara. Yes. Call me Elijah. For the second time that morning, she smiled. Yes, Elijah. Outside, the wind was picking up again. More snow was coming. But inside the warm kitchen, something had shifted. They were no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were allies, partners, family. And Silas Blackwood had no idea what was coming for him. They left the ranch house just before noon when the sun was high enough to soften the snow, but not bright enough to make them easy targets against the white landscape. Elijah carried Clara on his back, her arms wrapped around his neck like she'd done it 1,000 times. Samuel rode against Consuela's chest in a makeshift sling, sleeping peacefully despite everything. Doc Pruitt stayed behind. Someone had to keep watch on the house in case Blackwood's men decided to investigate. You sure about this trail? Elijah asked as they entered the timber. Papa brought me this way every fall, Clara said. There's a creek bed that runs behind the church. If we stay low, nobody from town can see us. The going was slow. Snow had drifted deep between the trees, and Elijah had to test each step before committing his weight. Clara's broken leg made her heavier than she should have been. She couldn't help him balance the way a healthy child would. But she never complained. Not once. Tell me about your mama, Elijah said after they'd been walking for 20 minutes. What was she like? Clara was quiet for a moment. She was tall, taller than most women, and she had this laugh that made everyone around her want to laugh too. She sounds special. She was. Papa used to say she was the only woman in Wyoming who could make him feel like a fool and a king at the same time. Elijah smiled despite himself. That's a good way to describe love. Did your wife make you feel that way? The question caught him off guard. Sarah? Yes. She had a way of looking at me that made me want to be better than I was. Mama looked at Papa like that. She never looked at Mr. Blackwood that way. Clara's arms tightened around Elijah's neck. I think she knew, deep down, that something was wrong with him. Then why did she marry him? Because she was scared. After Papa died, the bank started asking about loans. The ranch hands wanted their wages. Everybody wanted something, and Mama didn't have anything to give. Clara's voice dropped. Mr. Blackwood showed up like an answer to prayer. He paid off the debts, fixed the fences, bought Samuel new clothes. And your mama thought he was being kind. She wanted to believe it, so she did. Clara paused. I didn't believe it. I watched him when he thought nobody was looking. His eyes were wrong. Wrong how? Empty. Like there wasn't anybody home behind them. Elijah thought about the way Blackwood had smiled on his porch the night before. The girl was right. There was something missing in that man. Something human. They reached the creek bed and followed it toward the church. The water had frozen solid, making the footing treacherous, but the path invisible from above. How did you know to run? Elijah asked. The night of the blizzard. What made you decide to take Samuel and go? Clara didn't answer right away. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. He told me he was going to drown Samuel in the morning." Elijah stopped walking. "He said that to you?" "He said Samuel was too young to remember anything useful, but I was old enough to be a problem. He said if I told anyone what I saw at the well, he'd make Samuel disappear the same way he made Mama disappear." "So you ran?" "I waited until he fell asleep. Then I wrapped Samuel in Mama's coat, took the water gauge stick, and climbed out the window." Clara's voice cracked. "I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away." "You headed toward my ranch." "Mama told me about the Hartwells. She said if anything ever happened, I should find you. She said your grandfather made a promise to our family, and promises mean something to men like that." Elijah felt the weight of those words settle onto his shoulders. A promise made 60 years ago by a man he'd barely known. A promise that had somehow led this child through a killer blizzard to his door. "Your mama was right," he said quietly. "Promises do mean something." They walked in silence for a while. The church steeple became visible through the bare branches ahead. "Elijah." "Yeah. What's going to happen if we don't find the papers?" He didn't want to lie to her. "Blackwood has legal custody. If we can't prove he killed your mama, the sheriff will have to enforce those guardianship papers. And then Mr. Blackwood will kill us. I won't let that happen. You might not be able to stop it." Elijah shifted her weight on his back. "Listen to me, Clara. I've been to war. I've faced men who wanted me dead more times than I can count. And I'm still here. You know why. Why? Because I don't quit. Not ever. Not when it matters." He reached back and squeezed her hand. "And this matters." Clara squeezed back. "Okay. Okay what?" "Okay. I believe you." The Church of the Sacred Heart sat at the edge of town, its white clapboard walls stark against the gray winter sky. Elijah circled around to the back, keeping the building between them and the main street. Consuela was breathing hard from carrying Samuel through the snow. "Where do we go in?" "There's a cellar door on the north side," Clara said. "Father Martinez uses it to store supplies for the poor." They found the door half buried in a snowdrift. Elijah cleared it with his hands and pulled it open. Stone steps led down into darkness. "Wait here," he told Consuela. "If anyone comes, get the children away. Don't wait for me." "Elijah, promise me." Consuela nodded reluctantly. "I promise." Elijah descended into the cellar with Clara still on his back. The darkness swallowed them immediately. He had to feel his way forward, one hand on the cold stone wall. "It smells like candle wax," Clara whispered. "That's the storage room. Which way?" "Left. There should be a door." His fingers found the wooden frame. The door wasn't locked, just swollen shut from the cold. He put his shoulder against it and pushed. The room beyond was cramped and cluttered, boxes and crates stacked floor to ceiling, old furniture draped in sheets, the collected charity of 15 years of church work. "Wooden box with a cross on the lid," Elijah said. "Start looking." He set Clara down on a crate where she could search through the piles at her level. He took the higher shelves, running his hands over each container in the darkness. "Nothing here," Clara reported after several minutes. "Just old clothes and blankets." Elijah moved deeper into the room. His boot struck something solid, a small chest pushed against the far wall. He knelt and felt for the lid. His fingers traced a carved cross. "Clara, I found it." She scrambled toward him, dragging her splinted leg across the floor. He heard her sharp intake of breath when she touched the cross. "That's it. That's Mama's." The chest wasn't locked. Elijah lifted the lid and reached inside. His hand closed around a bundle of papers tied with string. "Got it. Let's go." They were halfway to the stairs when voices echoed from above. "I'm telling you, I saw someone go around back." A man's voice. Rough. Unfamiliar. "Then check it out. Mr. Blackwood's paying us to watch, not to guess." Another voice. Just as rough. Elijah pressed Clara against the wall, covering her small body with his own. He drew the pistol from his belt and waited. Footsteps on the cellar stairs. A lantern's glow pushing back the darkness. "Hello? Anyone down here?" Elijah didn't move, didn't breathe. The lantern swung left, then right. The man holding it was big barrel-chested and thick-armed. He wore a gun on his hip and carried himself like someone who knew how to use it. "Nothing," the man called up the stairs. "Just old church junk." "You sure?" "I'm sure. Come on. I'm freezing my ass off." The footsteps retreated. The cellar door slammed shut. Elijah counted to 100 before he let himself exhale. "That was close," Clara whispered. "Too close. We need another way out. There's a coal chute, behind the furnace. It comes up in the graveyard." They found the chute and crawled through on their bellies, Elijah pushing Clara ahead of him. The iron tube was narrow and cold, but it emptied them out behind a weathered headstone, far from prying eyes. Consuela was waiting where he'd left her, Samuel still sleeping against her chest. "Trouble?" she asked. "Blackwood's men. 2 of them. They didn't see us." "Did you find what you were looking for?" Elijah held up the bundle of papers. "Let's hope so." They made it back to the ranch house without incident. Doc Pruitt was pacing the kitchen when they came through the door, his face pale with worry. "Thank God. I was about to come looking for you." "We found the papers." Elijah set Clara on the kitchen table and placed the bundle in front of her. "Can you read them?" Clara's hands trembled as she untied the string. The papers inside were written in her mother's careful handwriting, copies of documents that Silas Blackwood had kept hidden. "This one's a contract," Clara said, squinting at the first page. "Between Silas Blackwood and the Union Pacific Railroad, dated March 15th, 1880. 6 months before he started courting your mother." "It says," Clara read slowly, her finger tracing each word. "In exchange for securing senior water rights to Willow Creek, the railroad agrees to pay the sum of $250,000 plus a surveying contract for the Wyoming line." Doc Pruitt whistled low. "That's more money than most men see in 10 lifetimes. "There's more." Clara turned to the next page. "This is a letter from someone named J.P. Harmon to Mr. Blackwood." "J.P. Harmon is the railroad's chief surveyor," Elijah said. "I've seen his name on territorial maps." Clara began reading aloud. "Dear Silas, the water rights situation in Wyoming has become critical. Our engineers report that without access to Willow Creek, the transcontinental route will require a 200-mile detour through Colorado. This is unacceptable. You assured us the Dawson widow would cooperate. If she will not sign voluntarily, alternative measures must be considered. The board is prepared to increase your payment to $300,000 if the matter is resolved by year's end. Time is of the essence. Yours, J.P. Harmon." Silence fell over the kitchen. "Alternative measures," Doc Pruitt repeated. "That's railroad talk for murder." "It gets worse." Clara's face had gone white. "Look at the date. September 10th, 1881. 5 days before your mother died. They planned it. All of it. And they wrote it down." Clara's hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. "Mama found these letters. She made copies. And Mr. Blackwood found out." Elijah put his hand over hers, steadying the trembling. "Your mama was trying to protect you. She knew if anything happened to her, these papers could put Blackwood away forever. But he's still free. He's still walking around like he didn't do anything wrong." "Not for long." Elijah gathered the papers carefully. "These documents prove premeditated murder. When the federal marshal sees them, Blackwood won't just lose custody. He'll hang." Consuela crossed herself. "Dios lo maldiga. May God curse him for what he's done." "What do we do now?" Clara asked. "We wait for the marshal. Doc Pruitt sent word to the territorial capital yesterday. He should arrive by tomorrow evening." "That's after the 72 hours are up." "I know." "Mr. Blackwood will come for us before then." "I know that too." Clara looked at him steadily. "Are you scared?" Elijah considered lying, considered telling her everything would be fine, that there was nothing to worry about, that good always triumphed over evil in the end. But she deserved better than lies. "Yeah," he said. "I'm scared. But being scared doesn't mean we stop fighting. It just means we fight smarter." "What's the smart play?" "Right now we secure the ranch, board up the windows, position ourselves for defense. If Blackwood wants these children, he's going to have to come through me to get them." Doc Pruitt stood up. "I'll ride to town, see if I can round up some men willing to stand with us." "Be careful. Blackwood has friends everywhere." "So do I." The old physician grabbed his coat. "Not everyone in this valley has forgotten what it means to do the right thing." After he left, Elijah started preparing for siege. He checked every rifle in the house, loaded every pistol, positioned ammunition at strategic points. Consuela boiled water and tore bandages, preparing for injuries she prayed wouldn't come. Clara watched from her position on the table, her broken leg elevated on a pillow. "Can I help?" "You already have. Those papers are going to put Blackwood away." "That's not enough." Her jaw set with determination. "I want to do something. I'm tired of being helpless." Elijah paused in his preparations. "You're not helpless, Clara. You survived things that would have broken grown men. That takes a kind of strength most people never find." "But I couldn't save Mama." "Neither could I. Neither could anyone." He knelt beside her. "Listen to me. What happened to your mother wasn't your fault. You were 8 years old. You did everything you could. I hid behind the woodpile. And if you hadn't, you'd be dead too. Samuel would be dead, and Blackwood would have gotten away with everything." Elijah took her hands in his. "Your mama made a choice that night. She threw Samuel to you instead of trying to save herself. She did that because she trusted you to keep him safe, and you did." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. "I miss her so much." "I know. I dream about her every night. Sometimes she's still alive and I try to warn her about Mr. Blackwood, but she can't hear me. And I wake up and remember she's gone, and it's like losing her all over again." Elijah pulled her into his arms. She was so small, so fragile, and she'd been carrying this weight alone for months. "I dream about Hannah too," he said quietly. "Every night for 15 years. I hear her calling for me from the creek, and I run as fast as I can, but I never get there in time." Clara looked up at him. "Does it ever stop hurting?" "No, but it changes. The sharp pain becomes something duller, something you learn to carry." He wiped the tears from her cheeks. "And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find people who help you carry it. Like you're helping me, like we're helping each other." Samuel woke up crying, and Consuela brought him to Clara. The little boy reached for his sister with chubby hands, and Clara's face transformed when she held him. All the fear and grief melted away, replaced by something fierce and protective. "I won't let anything happen to you," she whispered to her brother. "I promise." Elijah watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. For 15 years, he'd kept everyone at arm's length. He'd convinced himself that loving someone meant risking the pain of losing them, and he'd had enough pain to last a lifetime. But watching Clara with Samuel, watching the way she cradled him, despite her own injuries, he understood something he'd forgotten. Love wasn't a weakness, it was a reason to fight. The sun was setting when Doc Pruitt returned. He wasn't alone. Sheriff Josiah Brennan rode beside him, along with 2 deputies Elijah didn't recognize. Behind them came a lean man in a federal marshal's coat, his badge glinting in the fading light. "Elijah," Doc Pruitt called out. "This is Marshal James Crawford. He got here earlier than expected." The marshal dismounted and approached the porch with the confident stride of a man who'd spent his whole life walking into dangerous situations. "Mr. Hartwell, I've heard a lot about you." "Good things, I hope." "Interesting things." Crawford's eyes swept the ranch, taking in the boarded windows and defensive positions. "Looks like you're expecting trouble." "Trouble's been here since Tuesday night. It's wearing an expensive coat and calling itself Silas Blackwood. So I've been told. The marshal pulled off his gloves. Mind if we come inside? I'd like to see these documents everyone's talking about. Elijah led them into the kitchen, where Clara sat with Samuel on her lap. Her eyes widened when she saw the federal badge. You're the marshal. Yes, ma'am. Marshal James Crawford, at your service. Are you going to arrest Mr. Blackwood? That depends on what's in those papers. Elijah handed over the bundle. Crawford read through them slowly, his expression darkening with each page. This is damning, he said finally. Railroad contracts, conspiracy letters, evidence of premeditated murder. He looked at Clara. Your mother was a brave woman. Yes, sir, she was. These documents are enough to arrest Blackwood on federal charges, conspiracy fraud and first-degree murder. Crawford turned to Sheriff Brennan. You understand what this means? The sheriff nodded slowly. Those guardianship papers aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Exactly. A murderer can't inherit from his victim, and he certainly can't claim custody of her children. Clara's face lit up with hope for the first time since Elijah had met her. You mean it's over? Mr. Blackwood can't take us? Not if I have anything to say about it. Crawford tucked the papers inside his coat. But we still need to arrest him, and from what I understand, he's got men watching this ranch. 8 of them, Elijah confirmed. Professional guns. They've been out there since yesterday. Then we move tonight, before he realizes we're onto him. Sheriff Brennan stepped forward. I'll gather a posse. There are plenty of men in town who'll be glad to see Blackwood brought to justice. Do it quietly. We don't want to spook him. As the men filed out to make their preparations, Clara tugged at Elijah's sleeve. What happens after they arrest him? There'll be a trial. You might have to testify about what you saw. I can do that. I know you can. He squeezed her hand. And after the trial, we'll figure out the rest. What rest? Elijah hesitated. This was the question he'd been avoiding. The question that had been building in his chest since the moment he'd found her in the snow. You and Samuel are going to need somewhere to live. Someone to take care of you. Clara's brown eyes searched his face. Are you offering... Would you want me to? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked around the kitchen at Consuela stirring soup on the stove, at Samuel playing with a wooden spoon at the warm firelight flickering against the walls. This feels like home, she said quietly. More than anywhere has felt since Mama died. Then stay, both of you, for as long as you want. You mean it? I don't say things I don't mean. Clara threw her arms around his neck, holding on tight despite the pain in her leg. Elijah felt tears prick his eyes, the first tears he'd shed since Hannah's funeral 15 years ago. Thank you, Clara whispered. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get through tonight. We will. I know we will. How do you know? She pulled back and looked at him with those old soul eyes. Because you promised, and promises mean something to men like you. Outside, the wind was picking up. The temperature was dropping, and somewhere out there in the darkness, Silas Blackwood was planning his next move. But inside the warm kitchen, surrounded by people who had become family in just 3 days, Elijah felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. The hours crawled by. Midnight came and went. Clara finally fell asleep with Samuel curled against her side, both children breathing softly in the firelight. Elijah stood watch by the window, rifle in hand. Consuela kept the coffee hot and the lamps burning low. You should sleep, she said. Can't. You're no good to anyone exhausted. I'll sleep when Blackwood's in chains. He peered into the darkness. Something's wrong. What do you mean? It's too quiet. Those men have been watching the ranch for 2 days. Now suddenly there's no movement at all. Consuela joined him at the window. Maybe they left. Men like that don't leave until the job's done. Elijah's gut was screaming at him. Unless... A gunshot split the night. Then another. And another. The shots weren't coming from outside the ranch. They were coming from town. The posse, Elijah breathed. Blackwood knew. He knew we were coming for him. More shots. Shouts. The unmistakable sounds of a battle. "Stay here," Elijah ordered Consuela. "Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me." "Elijah!" But he was already running for the barn, already saddling Belle with hands that moved faster than thought. The old mare sensed his urgency and stood steady while he tightened the cinch. "One more ride, girl. That's all I'm asking." He rode toward town with the wind at his back and fire in his blood. Whatever was happening out there, he was going to end it, one way or another. The ride to town took 10 minutes. It felt like 10 hours. Elijah pushed Belle hard through the snow, his heart pounding in time with her hoofbeats. The gunshots had stopped by the time he crested the last hill, but the silence that replaced them was worse. Silence after a firefight usually meant one side had won. He just didn't know which side. The main street was empty when he rode in. Storefronts dark, windows shuttered. The whole town looked like it was holding its breath. Then he saw the bodies. 3 men lay in the snow outside the sheriff's office. 2 of them wore the rough clothes of hired guns. The third was Deputy Wilson blood, spreading from a wound in his chest. Steam rising from the red stain in the cold air. "Jake." Elijah dismounted and knelt beside the fallen deputy. "Jake, can you hear me?" Wilson's eyes fluttered open. "Hartwell, thank God." "What happened? Where's the marshal?" "Ambush." Wilson coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Blackwood knew we were coming. Had men waiting inside the hotel. Crawford took a bullet in the shoulder. Sheriff got him to the doc's office, but—" Another cough. "Blackwood's gone. Took 4 men and rode out toward the mountains." "Which way?" "North, toward the old mining camp." Wilson grabbed Elijah's arm with surprising strength. "He's got hostages, Elijah. Grabbed the preacher and Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house. Said if anyone follows, he'll kill them both." Elijah's blood went cold. Mrs. Patterson. She was the one who saw Margaret Dawson with bruises. Blackwood figured she might testify. Wilson's grip loosened. "You have to stop him. If he gets to the mountains, he'll disappear. All those papers won't mean anything if we can't find him to arrest him." "I'll find him. Be careful. He's desperate now. Desperate men do desperate things." Elijah squeezed the deputy's hand. "You hang on. I'll send someone to help." He found Sheriff Brennan inside the doc's office, getting a bullet wound in his arm stitched up. Marshal Crawford lay on the examination table, pale but conscious, his shoulder wrapped in bloody bandages. "Hartwell." The marshal's voice was weak but steady. "I heard what Wilson told you. I'm going after him. Alone against 4 armed men. You got a better idea." Crawford struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Give me an hour. I can ride." "In an hour, Blackwood will be halfway to Montana, and those hostages will be dead." "Then take some men with you." Elijah looked around the room. Sheriff Brennan was in no shape to ride. Doc Pruitt was busy trying to save lives. The posse had scattered when the ambush started, and there was no time to round them up again. "There's no one to take." He checked his rifle, counted his ammunition. "I know those mountains. Spent 4 years hunting in them before the war. If anyone can track Blackwood through that terrain, it's me. And if you catch up to him, 4 against 1 isn't good odds." "No, but those hostages don't have any odds at all if I don't try." Crawford studied him for a long moment. "You're not just doing this for the hostages, are you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's a little girl back at your ranch who's counting on you to come home, and a baby boy who doesn't know it yet, but he's counting on you too." Elijah felt the truth of those words settle into his bones. 3 days ago, he'd been a man with nothing to lose. Now he had everything to lose. And that made him more dangerous, not less. "I'm coming home," he said. "And I'm bringing Blackwood back to hang. That's a promise." He rode out of town before anyone could argue further. The trail north was easy to follow at first. Fresh hoof prints in the snow heading straight for the mountain pass. Blackwood wasn't trying to hide his tracks. He was counting on speed and the threat of dead hostages to keep pursuit at bay. But Elijah knew something Blackwood didn't. There was only one way through that pass in winter, and it narrowed to a bottleneck about 3 miles up. If he could get there first using the old hunting trails his grandfather had shown him, he could set up an ambush of his own. He pushed Bell off the main trail and into the timber. The going was harder here. Snow drifted deep between the trees, but the mare was sure-footed and strong. She'd carried him through worse. "Just a little farther, girl. Then you can rest." The hunting trail wound up the mountainside in a series of switchbacks that would have been invisible to anyone who didn't know they were there. Elijah had walked this path 100 times as a young man tracking elk and deer through terrain that would kill a greenhorn in hours. Now he was tracking something more dangerous. He reached the bottleneck just as the sun was starting to set. The pass narrowed here between two rock faces barely wide enough for 2 horses to ride abreast. Anyone coming through would be exposed and vulnerable for about 50 yards, perfect for an ambush. Elijah dismounted and led Bell into a sheltered spot behind a boulder. He checked his rifle one more time, then settled into position and waited. The cold crept into his bones as the minutes passed. He thought about Clara back at the ranch, probably awake by now, and wondering where he'd gone. He thought about Samuel, too young to understand any of this, but somehow at the center of everything. He thought about Hannah. For 15 years, he'd been running from the memory of his daughter's death, building walls around his heart, convincing himself that the safest way to live was to never let anyone get close enough to hurt him again. But Clara had crashed through those walls like a runaway train. 3 days. That's all it had taken. 3 days, and he'd gone from a man with nothing to a man with a family. A man with something worth dying for. The sound of hoofbeats echoed up the pass. Elijah pressed himself against the rock and watched as Blackwood's party came into view. 4 men on horseback moving fast. 2 of them had the preacher and Mrs. Patterson on their horses, hands bound, mouths gagged. Blackwood rode at the front, his expensive coat now stained with blood and snow. Gone was the polished businessman who'd smiled on Elijah's porch. In his place was something rawer, something desperate and dangerous. "Hold up!" The group stopped at Blackwood's command. He scanned the rocks on either side of the pass, his eyes narrowing. "Something's wrong." "What is it, boss?" "This is too easy. We've been riding for an hour and nobody's followed us." Blackwood drew his pistol. "Someone's ahead of us. I can feel it." Elijah knew he'd lost the element of surprise. In about 30 seconds, Blackwood's men would spread out and search the rocks. They'd find him, and then it would be 4 against 1 in close quarters. He had to act now. "Blackwood." His voice echoed off the rock faces, making it impossible to pinpoint his location. All 4 men spun toward the sound guns raised. "Who's there?" "You know who it is." Elijah kept moving as he spoke, circling around to a new position. "Let the hostages go. This is between you and me." Blackwood laughed. The sound was harsh and brittle. "Hartwell, I should have known. The old hermit with a hero complex. I'm giving you one chance. Surrender now and you'll get a trial. Keep running, and I'll put a bullet in you." "You're bluffing. You're 1 man against 4, and you've got no leverage." Elijah's rifle cracked. The bullet struck the rock inches from Blackwood's head, showering him with stone chips. "That was a warning. The next one won't be." Blackwood's composure cracked. "Find him. Spread out, and find him." His men started to move, but Elijah was already in a new position. His second shot took one of them in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse with a scream of pain. "3 against 1 now!" Elijah called out. "Want to keep going?" Blackwood grabbed Mrs. Patterson from the man holding her and pressed his pistol against her temple. "Show yourself! Hartwell, show yourself, or I'll paint these rocks with her brains." Elijah's finger tightened on the trigger. From this angle, he had a clear shot at Blackwood's head. But the pistol was pressed right against Mrs. Patterson's skull. If Blackwood's finger spasmed on the trigger as he fell, she'd die anyway. "I'm counting to 3. Blackwood's voice had risen to a scream. 1. Elijah moved to a new position, trying to find a better angle. 2. There. If he could circle around just a few more feet, he'd have a shot that would take Blackwood down without endangering the hostage. 3. Wait. Elijah stepped out from behind the rocks, his rifle pointed at the sky. "I'm here. Let her go." Blackwood's smile was the most terrifying thing Elijah had ever seen. "Drop the rifle. Let her go first. You're not in a position to negotiate." Blackwood pressed the pistol harder against Mrs. Patterson's temple. The woman whimpered through her gag. "Drop the rifle or she dies right now." Elijah let the rifle fall to the snow. Now the pistol. Slowly. He drew his sidearm and dropped it beside the rifle. "Kick them away." He did. "Good." Blackwood shoved Mrs. Patterson toward one of his men. "Tie him up. We're taking him with us." The 2 remaining gunmen approached Elijah with ropes. He didn't resist as they bound his hands behind his back. Every second he could buy was a second for the marshal to send help. "You know this is over," Elijah said quietly. "The marshal has the documents. The whole territory knows what you did." "The territory doesn't matter. In 3 days I'll be in Canada. In a month I'll be in Europe with enough money to live like a king for the rest of my life. And the children Clara and Samuel." Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. "They'll be dealt with. They're under federal protection. There's no protection strong enough when you have enough money." Blackwood leaned close, his breath hot against Elijah's face. "Those water rights are worth a fortune. The railroad will pay anything to get them. And once I'm safe across the border, I'll send men back to finish what I started. You'll have to go through me first. That's exactly what I intend to do." Blackwood stepped back. "But not here. Not where anyone might find the body." He gestured to his men. "Mount up. We've wasted enough time." They threw Elijah across one of the horses and tied him down like a sack of grain. The position was agonizing, blood rushing to his head with every step the horse took. But he was alive, and as long as he was alive, there was hope. The group rode deeper into the mountains as night fell. The temperature dropped like a stone, and Elijah could feel his fingers and toes going numb despite his heavy clothes. Blackwood didn't seem to notice or care. "Where are we going?" the preacher asked. He'd managed to work the gag out of his mouth. "There's nothing up here but old mining camps." "Exactly." Blackwood's voice was calm now, almost cheerful. "Nobody comes up here in winter. Nobody will find what's left of you until spring." Mrs. Patterson started crying softly. "Please," the preacher said. "Whatever quarrel you have with Mr. Hartwell, let Mrs. Patterson go. She's never done anything to you. She saw things, heard things. In my experience, witnesses have a way of causing problems." "I won't say anything," Mrs. Patterson pleaded through her tears. "I swear on my life." "You're going to swear on your life either way, ma'am." They reached the old mining camp just as the moon was rising. Abandoned buildings stood like skeletons against the snow, their windows dark and empty. The silver vein that had drawn men here 30 years ago had played out long before Elijah was born. Now it would serve as a graveyard. Blackwood's men dragged Elijah off the horse and threw him into one of the old bunkhouses. Mrs. Patterson and the preacher followed, shoved roughly through the door. "Watch them," Blackwood ordered. "I need to think." The door slammed shut, leaving them in darkness. "Is everyone all right?" Elijah asked, struggling against his bonds. "I think so." The preacher's voice came from somewhere to his left. "Mrs. Patterson." "I'm here." Her voice was shaky but steady. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't told the sheriff what I saw—" "You did the right thing. This isn't your fault." He's going to kill us, isn't he? Elijah didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. They sat in the darkness for what felt like hours. Elijah worked at his bonds until his wrists were raw and bleeding, but the knots held firm. Professional work. Blackwood's men knew what they were doing. The door banged open. Blackwood stood in the moonlight, his pistol in his hand. Behind him, one of his men carried a lantern that threw dancing shadows across the walls. "I've been thinking," Blackwood said conversationally, "about what to do with you." "Let them go." Elijah's voice was hoarse. "They're not part of this. Everyone's part of this now." Blackwood crouched in front of him. "You should have minded your own business, Hartwell. You should have let me take those children and walked away." "I couldn't do that." "Why, they're not your blood. They're nothing to you." Elijah thought about Clara's fierce brown eyes, about the way she'd held Samuel in the blizzard, about the trust in her voice when she'd said, "Promises mean something to men like you." "They're everything to me," he said quietly. Blackwood's face twisted with something that might have been confusion or contempt. "You're a fool. You're going to die for 2 children you've known for 3 days. There are worse things to die for. Name one." "Money." For a moment, Blackwood just stared at him. Then he stood up abruptly and turned away. "Kill them," he said to his man. "Start with the woman. Make it slow. I want Hartwell to hear." "No." Elijah lunged against his bonds, but it was useless. The gunman advanced on Mrs. Patterson, drawing a knife from his belt. Then the window exploded inward. Glass and wood fragments flew everywhere. A figure came through the opening landing in a crouch, with a rifle already up and firing. The gunman went down with a bullet in his chest. Blackwood spun, raising his pistol, but the figure was already moving. A second shot sent his gun flying from his hand with a spray of blood. "Don't move." The voice was high and clear, a child's voice. "Don't you move, Mr. Blackwood." Elijah's heart stopped. Clara stood in the moonlight, her grandfather's rifle braced against her shoulder. Her broken leg was splinted and wrapped, but she was standing on it anyway. Her face was pale with pain and determination. "Clara, how?" "Later." She kept her rifle trained on Blackwood. "Mrs. Patterson, can you untie Mr. Hartwell?" The woman scrambled to obey, her fingers fumbling with the knots. "You little bitch!" Blackwood snarled, clutching his bleeding hand. "You should have died in that blizzard." "But I didn't." Clara's voice was steady as stone. "And you're not going to hurt anyone else. Ever. You won't shoot me. You're just a child." "I shot your man." Blackwood's eyes flickered to the body on the floor. "That was luck. You won't do it again." "Try me." The bonds came loose. Elijah grabbed the fallen gunman's pistol and leveled it at Blackwood. "It's over, Silas. You're done." Blackwood's eyes darted between Elijah and Clara, calculating odds, looking for an opening. His remaining man was still outside, but the sounds of a scuffle suggested he was being dealt with. "Who else came with you?" Elijah asked Clara. "Consuela and Doc Pruitt. They've got the other one." "How did you find us?" "I know these mountains. Papa brought me here to see the old mines when I was little." Clara's rifle never wavered. "I told you I could help." Blackwood laughed bitterly. "Brought down by a crippled child. That's fitting, I suppose." "I'm not crippled," Clara said. "I'm just hurt. There's a difference." "Is there?" "My mama taught me that. She said pain is just the body telling you you're still alive. And as long as you're alive, you can fight." Blackwood's face went pale. "Your mother was a fool." "My mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She died protecting me and Samuel. And you're going to hang for killing her." The door burst open. Consuela and Doc Pruitt entered, followed by Sheriff Brennan and 2 deputies. The sheriff's arm was in a sling, but his gun was steady. "Silas Blackwood, you're under arrest for the murder of Eleanor Dawson, conspiracy to commit murder-kidnapping, and about a dozen other charges I'll figure out on the way back to town." Blackwood said nothing as they put him in chains, but his eyes stayed fixed on Clara until they dragged him out the door. When he was gone, Elijah caught Clara as her legs finally gave out. "You shouldn't have come," he said, holding her close. "Your leg is fine. Doc Pruitt splinted it again before we left. You could have been killed. So could you." She looked up at him with those old soul eyes. "I told you, I'm not helpless, and I'm not going to watch someone else die when I can do something about it. Clara, you came for me when I was dying in the snow. You held my hand when the doctor set my leg. You promised to keep me safe." Her voice cracked. "Did you think I wouldn't do the same for you?" Elijah felt tears running down his face for the second time in 3 days. "You're something else, you know that. Mama used to say I was stubborn as a mule." She was right. Clara smiled through her own tears. "Can we go home now?" Home. The word hit Elijah like a physical blow. For 15 years, that word had meant nothing but 4 walls and empty silence. Now it meant something different. Now it meant family. "Yeah," he said, lifting her gently in his arms. "Let's go home." The ride back to town took most of the night. Clara slept against Elijah's chest, exhausted beyond anything her small body could fight. Doc Pruitt had given her laudanum for the pain, and she'd finally stopped insisting she was fine and let herself rest. Consuela rode beside them, with Samuel bundled in her arms. The baby had been fussy all night, as if he somehow knew his sister had been in danger. Now he was quiet, his dark eyes watching the stars through gaps in the clouds. Sheriff Brennan's deputies escorted Blackwood at the rear of the group. The man hadn't spoken since they'd put him in chains, but his eyes never stopped moving. Calculating, planning, looking for any opportunity to escape. He wouldn't find one. "How's she doing?" Doc Pruitt asked, bringing his horse alongside Elijah's. "Sleeping, finally. That leg is going to need proper rest. She's done more damage pushing herself tonight." "I know." Elijah looked down at Clara's pale face. "But I couldn't have stopped her if I'd tried." "No, I don't reckon you could have." The old physician smiled slightly. "She's got her mother's spirit, that one. Eleanor Dawson was the same way. Once she set her mind to something heaven and earth couldn't move her." "You knew Eleanor." "Delivered both her children. Treated her husband when he took sick." Doc Pruitt's smile faded. "I should have seen what Blackwood was doing. Should have paid more attention after she married him. You couldn't have known." "Maybe not, but I should have looked harder." He shook his head. "That's the thing about evil, Elijah. It doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks like a respectable man in a nice coat saying all the right things." Elijah glanced back at Blackwood. "He won't be saying anything much longer." "No, he won't." They reached town as dawn was breaking. The streets were empty, but Elijah could see faces in the windows. Word had spread fast. By the time they reached the jail, a crowd had gathered despite the early hour. "Murderer!" someone shouted as they led Blackwood inside. "Hang him! Justice for Eleanor Dawson!" Sheriff Brennan held up his hand. "There'll be justice. Legal justice. A trial and a proper verdict. That's how we do things in this territory." The crowd grumbled but didn't press further. They trusted Brennan. They knew he'd see it through. Inside the jail, Blackwood was locked in the strongest cell. 2 deputies would guard him around the clock until the trial. No chances, no mistakes. "I want a lawyer," Blackwood said as the cell door clanged shut. "You'll get one," Brennan replied. "Not that it'll do you much good. Everyone deserves a defense. You deserve a rope, but you'll get your day in court first." Elijah carried Clara to Doc Pruitt's office where a proper bed was waiting. She stirred as he laid her down, her brown eyes fluttering open. "Where are we?" "Town. You're safe." "Mr. Blackwood." "Locked up. He's not going anywhere." Clara relaxed back against the pillow. "Good." She was quiet for a moment. Elijah. Yeah. I was scared. I know. Not of getting hurt. Of losing you. Her voice cracked. I already lost Mama. I couldn't lose you too. Elijah took her hand. You're not going to lose me, I promise. You keep making promises. And I keep them. She smiled weakly. Yeah, you do. Doc Pruitt shooed Elijah out so Clara could rest properly. He found Consuela in the waiting room, Samuel asleep in her arms. You should rest too, she said. Can't. Too much to do. Elijah. Her voice was gentle but firm. You've been awake for 2 days. You rode through a blizzard, got captured by a murderer, and nearly died in the mountains. If you don't sleep, you'll collapse. After the trial. The trial won't be for days, maybe weeks. You can't stay awake that long. He knew she was right. His body was screaming for rest, every muscle aching, his eyes burning with exhaustion. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Blackwood's gun pressed against Mrs. Patterson's head, saw Clara standing in the moonlight with a rifle braced against her shoulder, saw how close he'd come to losing everything. Just a few hours, he finally agreed. Wake me if anything happens. He slept on a cot in Doc Pruitt's back room, his pistol under his pillow and his rifle within arm's reach. Old habits from the war. Some things you never forgot. His dreams were confused and dark. Hannah drowning in the creek. Clara crawling through the snow. Sarah's face as he'd last seen it, pale and still in her coffin. The dead and the living all mixed together calling his name. He woke with a start to find Clara standing beside the cot. How long was I out? 6 hours. Doc Pruitt said I shouldn't wake you, but... She hesitated. Marshal Crawford wants to talk to you. Elijah sat up, rubbing his face. How are you feeling? Better. Doc gave me something for the pain. She held up a wooden crutch. He says I have to use this for a few weeks. No more walking on the leg. You should have been using it all along. I know. She looked away. I'm sorry I scared you. You didn't scare me. He reached out and tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. You amazed me. What you did at that mining camp. Most grown men wouldn't have had the courage. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly what courage is. Marshal Crawford was waiting in Doc Pruitt's parlor. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, but he was on his feet looking stronger than he had the night before. Mr. Hartwell, good to see you're still with us. Good to be here. What's happening? The territorial judge arrives tomorrow. Trial will start the day after. Crawford settled into a chair with a grimace of pain. I need to take your statement, and Clara's if she's up to it. She can give her statement, but I don't want her in the courtroom. She has to testify. She's the only witness to her mother's murder. Elijah felt his jaw tighten. She's 9 years old. She's been through enough. I understand that, but without her testimony, there's a chance Blackwood walks free. What about the documents, the railroad contracts? Circumstantial. They prove conspiracy, but not murder. For that, we need someone who saw what happened. Crawford's voice was gentle but firm. I know it's hard, but Clara is the key to everything. Without her, Blackwood might escape justice. Clara spoke up from the doorway. I'll do it. Both men turned. She stood there with her crutch, her face pale, but determined. Clara, you don't have to... Yes, I do. She moved into the room and sat down carefully, favoring her injured leg. Marshal Crawford is right. I'm the only one who saw what happened. If I don't testify, Mr. Blackwood might go free, and then he'll come after Samuel and me again. You're sure about this? No. Her voice was honest. I'm scared. But Mama always said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are scared. Crawford nodded slowly. Your mother was a wise woman. Yes, sir, she was. They spent the next 2 hours going over Clara's testimony. Every detail of the night her mother died. The argument about the papers, the way Blackwood had grabbed Eleanor's arms, the walk to the well, the push. Clara told it all without crying. Her voice was steady and clear, like she was reciting something she'd memorized. Which, in a way, she had. She'd been living with those memories for months, playing them over and over in her head. Now she was finally telling someone who could do something about it. When she finished, Crawford was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "That's the most detailed eyewitness account I've ever heard. You have a remarkable memory, Miss Dawson. My mama made me memorize the water rights documents. She said I needed to practice keeping important things in my head. She was right. That practice may have just saved your brother's life." After Crawford left, Elijah and Clara sat together in silence. The weight of what was coming pressed down on them like a physical thing. "What happens after the trial?" Clara asked finally. "If Blackwood is convicted, he hangs." "No, I mean, what happens to me and Samuel?" Elijah had been dreading this question. He'd been trying not to think about it, focusing on the immediate crisis instead. But Clara deserved an answer. "What do you want to happen?" She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I want to stay with you." Something cracked open in Elijah's chest. "Clara, I know it's a lot to ask. You didn't sign up for 2 children. You were just trying to save us, and now you're stuck with us, and that's not fair to you. Clara, listen to me. And Samuel is just a baby. He needs so much care. And my leg is broken, so I can't even help properly. And I have nightmares every night, and sometimes I wake up screaming, 'Clara!'" He took her hands in his. "Stop." She fell silent, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm not stuck with you," Elijah said. "I chose you. The moment I found you in that snow, I made a choice, and every day since then, I've made that choice again." "But why? You don't even know us." "I know enough. I know you crawled through a blizzard with a broken leg to save your brother. I know you rode into those mountains to save me. I know you're the bravest, strongest, most stubborn child I've ever met." Clara's tears spilled over. "I don't feel brave. I feel scared all the time." "That's because you've had to be scared to survive. But you don't have to be scared anymore." He squeezed her hands. "I want you to stay. You and Samuel both. Not because I'm stuck with you. Because I can't imagine my life without you." "You mean it?" "I don't say things I don't mean." Clara threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Elijah held her and let her cry, feeling his own tears running down his cheeks. 15 years of walls crumbling in an instant. 15 years of loneliness ending in a child's embrace. The trial began 2 days later. The territorial judge, a stern man named William Foster, had arrived from Cheyenne with a reputation for fairness and an intolerance for corruption. He listened to the charges against Blackwood with a face like carved granite. Murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, child abuse, fraud. The list went on and on. Blackwood's lawyer, a slick-tongued man from Denver named Charles Whitfield, tried every trick in the book. He challenged the evidence. He questioned the witnesses' credibility. He painted Blackwood as a grieving widower who'd been falsely accused by a traumatized child. But the evidence was overwhelming. The railroad contracts showed premeditation. The letters from J.P. Harmon proved conspiracy. The falsified death certificate demonstrated cover-up. Dr. Hayes's confession from California, read aloud in court, confirmed that Blackwood had paid him to lie. And then Clara took the stand. The courtroom went silent as she made her way to the witness chair, her crutch clicking against the wooden floor. She looked impossibly small up there, her feet barely touching the ground, her brown eyes scanning the crowd until they found Elijah's face. He nodded. "You can do this." She nodded back. "State your name for the record," Judge Foster said gently. "Clara Marie Dawson." "And how old are you, Miss Dawson?" 9 years old, sir." "Do you understand the importance of telling the truth in this courtroom?" "Yes, sir. Lying is a sin, and Mama always said the truth was the only weapon that never ran out of ammunition." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Judge Foster almost smiled. "Very well. You may proceed, Marshal Crawford." Crawford rose from his chair. "Clara, can you tell the court what you witnessed on the night of September 15th, 1881? Clara took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking in her lap, but her voice was steady. "It was after supper. Samuel was crying because he was teething, and Mama was trying to calm him down. Mr. Blackwood came home drunk. He'd been to town meeting with the railroad men. What happened when he arrived? He started yelling at Mama. Said she was ruining everything by being stubborn. Said if she'd just sign the papers, they'd all be rich." "What papers?" "The water rights transfer. Mr. Blackwood wanted Mama to sign away our family's claim to Willow Creek. But Mama wouldn't do it. She said those rights belonged to Samuel and me, and she was holding them in trust." "What did Mr. Blackwood do then?" Clara's voice dropped. "He hit her, hard, across the face. She fell down, but she didn't cry. She just looked at him with those eyes she got when she was really angry. What happened next? He grabbed her by the arms and dragged her outside. I followed them. I was scared, but I had to see what was happening." "And what did you see?" Clara closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears were streaming down her cheeks. But her voice never wavered. "He took her to the old well behind our house. It's deep, 40 feet or more. He said if she didn't sign the papers, he'd throw her in." "What did your mother do?" "She was holding Samuel. She looked at me where I was hiding behind the woodpile. She knew I was watching." Clara's voice cracked. "She threw Samuel to me, just tossed him like he was a sack of grain. I caught him, but barely. And then—" "Take your time, Clara." "Mr. Blackwood pushed her. She fell backward into the well. I heard her hit the water. I heard her scream once." Clara wiped her eyes. Then nothing. The courtroom was utterly silent. Someone in the gallery was crying softly. "Did you see Mr. Blackwood do anything after your mother fell?" "He climbed down with a rope and pulled her out, but she was already dead. He carried her to the barn and laid her out like she was sleeping. And then he came and found me. I was still holding Samuel. He said if I ever told anyone what I saw, he'd make Samuel disappear the same way he made Mama disappear." Clara's eyes found Blackwood across the courtroom. "He said accidents happen to children all the time." Whitfield rose to cross-examine, but even he seemed shaken by Clara's testimony. His questions were half-hearted, easily deflected. When he tried to suggest she was making things up, Clara responded with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to hide. "I know what I saw, sir. I've been seeing it in my nightmares every night since it happened. I couldn't forget it if I wanted to." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Judge Foster delivered the sentence without hesitation. "Silas Blackwood, you have been found guilty of the premeditated murder of Eleanor Dawson, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, child abuse, and fraud. For these crimes you are sentenced to death by hanging. The sentence will be carried out at dawn 1 week from today. May God have mercy on your soul." Blackwood's face went white as they led him away. For the first time since his arrest, he looked truly afraid. Clara watched him go with an expression Elijah couldn't quite read. "How do you feel?" he asked her afterward. "I don't know." She was quiet for a moment. "I thought I'd feel happy, or relieved, but I just feel empty." "That's normal. Justice doesn't always feel the way we expect." "Does it get better?" "Eventually. The emptiness fills in with other things. New memories, new feelings." He put his arm around her shoulders. "Time helps, and family." "Family." Clara tested the word. "I like the sound of that." Marshal Crawford found them outside the courthouse. "There's one more matter to discuss," he said. "The water rights." "What about them?" "The railroad company has been in contact with the territorial governor. They still want access to Willow Creek, and they're willing to pay handsomely for it." Crawford paused. They're offering $300,000 for a perpetual easement. Elijah stared at him. 300,000. The new management wants to distance themselves from Blackwood's methods. They're prepared to negotiate in good faith. The rights belong to Clara and Samuel. I don't have the authority to sell them. Actually, that's part of why I'm here. Crawford produced a document from his coat. Judge Foster has appointed you as legal guardian of both children pending formal adoption proceedings. As their guardian, you're authorized to make decisions about their property. Elijah looked at Clara. What do you think? Clara considered carefully. Mama died protecting those water rights. But she wasn't protecting the water. She was protecting us. She met Elijah's eyes. If selling them means Samuel and I are safe, I think she'd be okay with that. Are you sure? No. But I'm tired of being afraid. I want to live like a normal kid again. Go to school, make friends, not have to worry about men coming to hurt us. She smiled slightly. Besides, $300,000 is a lot of money. Mama would say that's enough to build a whole new future. Elijah turned back to Crawford. Tell the railroad we'll negotiate. But they deal with me, not some lawyer. And the money goes into trust for Clara and Samuel until they're of age. I'll make the arrangements. Crawford shook Elijah's hand. It's been an honor, Mr. Hartwell. This territory could use more men like you. It's got plenty. They just need a reason to stand up. Crawford nodded. Sometimes that reason is a 9-year-old girl with a rifle. They both looked at Clara, who was walking toward the wagon where Consuela waited with Samuel. She's something special, Crawford said. Yeah. Elijah watched her moving carefully on her crutch, her small shoulders squared with determination. She really is. The hanging took place a week later, just as the sun was coming up. Elijah didn't attend. Neither did Clara. Some things didn't need to be witnessed. Some endings were better left to the imagination. But that evening, as the sun was setting over the mountains, they stood together at Eleanor Dawson's grave. It was the first time Clara had been there since the funeral, and she gripped Elijah's hand tight as they approached. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. Just be here. Clara knelt carefully in front of the headstone, her splinted legs stretched out awkwardly to the side. She placed a small bouquet of dried winter flowers at the base. Hi, Mama, she said quietly. I'm sorry I haven't come to visit. I've been busy. Elijah stood back, giving her space. Mr. Blackwood is dead now. The judge said he was guilty, and they hanged him this morning. So you can rest easy. He can't hurt anyone else. She was quiet for a moment, tracing the letters of her mother's name with her finger. Samuel's getting big. He's starting to say words now. His first word was no, which Consuela says is normal for babies, but I think it means he's going to be stubborn like you. A tear slipped down her cheek. I miss you, Mama. Every day. I dream about you sometimes, and when I wake up, I forget for a second that you're gone. And then I remember, and it hurts all over again. Elijah felt his own eyes burning. But I'm okay. I want you to know that. Mr. Hartwell is taking care of us. He's grumpy sometimes and he doesn't talk much, but he's good. He reminds me of Papa in some ways. He makes me feel safe. She paused, looking up at the darkening sky. I think you'd like him, Mama. I think you'd be happy that we found each other. Clara struggled to her feet. Elijah stepped forward to help her, and she leaned against him for a moment before turning back to the grave. I have to go now, but I'll come back, I promise. She touched the headstone one more time. I love you, Mama, forever and always. They walked back to the wagon in silence. Samuel was asleep in Consuela's arms, his small face peaceful in the fading light. Elijah, Clara said as he helped her onto the seat. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For letting me say goodbye. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. She was your mother. You have every right to visit her whenever you want. I know, But you didn't have to come with me. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You didn't have to do any of this. Yeah, I did. Why? Elijah looked out at the road ahead at the mountains silhouetted against the evening sky at the land his grandfather had settled 60 years ago. Because that's what family does, he said. We show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Clara smiled and closed her eyes. By the time they reached the ranch, she was asleep. Spring came slow to Wyoming that year. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and muddy trails that made travel difficult. But inside the Hartwell ranch house, something was blooming that had nothing to do with the season. Clara's leg healed straighter than Doc Pruitt had dared hope. She graduated from the crutch to a cane, then from the cane to a slight limp that she insisted didn't bother her at all. By April, she was walking the fence line with Elijah, learning the boundaries of land that would someday belong to her and Samuel. This is where your grandfather's claim ends and ours begins, she said one afternoon, pointing to an old stone marker half buried in the spring mud. Mama showed me once when I was little. Your mama knew this land well. She loved it, said there was no place on earth as beautiful as Wyoming in the spring. Clara paused, looking out at the rolling hills. She was right. Elijah watched her face, seeing the ghost of grief that still lingered there. It had been 2 months since Blackwood's hanging, but some wounds took longer to heal than broken bones. You miss her. Every day. Clara's voice was steady. But it's different now. Before, missing her felt like drowning. Now it's more like carrying something heavy. It's still hard, but I can breathe. That's how healing works, one day at a time. Is that how it was with Hannah? The question caught him off guard. Clara had never asked about his daughter directly before. She'd mentioned her a few times in passing, but never like this. For a long time I didn't heal at all, Elijah admitted. I just stopped. Stopped feeling, stopped caring, stopped living really. He looked at her. Until you came along. Me. You and Samuel. You reminded me what it feels like to have something worth fighting for. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she slipped her hand into his. Mama used to say that broken things can be stronger when they're put back together, like how a bone heals thicker at the break. Your mama was a wise woman. I know. Clara smiled. I'm starting to remember the good things about her, not just the end. The way she laughed, the songs she sang when she was cooking, how she always smelled like lavender soap. Those are good memories to hold on to. They are. Clara squeezed his hand. But I'm making new memories too, with you and Consuela and Samuel. And those are good too. Different, but good. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. Samuel was on the porch with Consuela taking his first wobbly steps while she clapped and encouraged him in Spanish. Look at him, Clara said, her face lighting up. He's walking. She ran ahead, her limp barely noticeable, to scoop her brother into her arms. Samuel squealed with delight and grabbed fistfuls of her hair. Elijah hung back watching them. A 9-year-old girl and a toddler orphaned by violence, traumatized by cruelty. By all rights, they should have been broken beyond repair. Instead, they were thriving. Consuela caught his eye and smiled. She understood what he was feeling without him having to say it. She'd been with him for 15 years through the darkest times of his life. She'd watched him build walls around his heart and close himself off from everything that mattered. Now she was watching those walls come down. Dinner will be ready in an hour, she called out. Clara, help me set the table. Coming. Clara handed Samuel to Elijah and hurried inside. The little boy looked up at Elijah with his mother's dark eyes and reached for his face with chubby hands. Da, Samuel said clearly. Elijah's heart stopped. What did you say? Da, 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 da. Consuela appeared in the doorway, her hand pressed to her chest. Did he just... I think so. Samuel grinned, showing off 4 tiny teeth. Da. Elijah held the boy close, feeling tears prick his eyes for the 100th time since that night in the blizzard. He'd thought his heart was dead. He'd been wrong. "Yeah, little man," he said hoarsely. "I'm here." The adoption papers arrived in May. Judge Foster had expedited the process given the circumstances. Elijah sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread before him, reading every word carefully. Clara sat beside him, her chin propped on her hands. "What does it say?" "It says that as of today, you and Samuel are legally my children, my heirs, my family. Forever. Forever." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "So it's real? Nobody can take us away." "Nobody. Not ever." Elijah pushed the papers toward her. "But I need you to understand something before we sign." "What?" "This isn't just about protecting you from people like Blackwood. It's about being a family. A real family. That means I'm responsible for you, but it also means you're stuck with me, good days and bad days, when I'm grumpy and when I'm not." He paused. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Clara didn't hesitate. "I've been sure since the first night, when you held my hand while the doctor set my leg." She took the pen from the table. "Where do I sign?" They signed the papers together, Clara's careful schoolgirl handwriting next to Elijah's rough scrawl. Consuela witnessed both signatures, tears streaming down her face. "It's official," she said, hugging Clara tight. "You're a Hartwell now." "Clara Hartwell." Clara tested the name. "I like it." "What about your mama's name, Dawson?" Clara thought about it. "Can I keep both Clara Dawson Hartwell?" "You can be whatever you want to be," Elijah said. "Then that's what I'll be. Clara Dawson Hartwell." She grinned. "That way I carry both families with me." Elijah looked at this girl who had crawled through a blizzard to save her brother, who had faced down a killer in a mountain mining camp, who had testified against her mother's murderer, with a steady voice and dry eyes. She was 9 years old, and she was the strongest person he'd ever known. "Your mama would be proud of you," he said. "I know." Clara's smile softened. And so would Hannah. The railroad money came through in June. $300,000 deposited in a territorial bank account with Elijah as trustee until Clara and Samuel came of age. It was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Enough to build an empire. Elijah had no interest in empires. "What are we going to do with it all?" Clara asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Samuel was asleep in Elijah's arms. "What do you want to do with it?" Clara considered the question seriously. "I want to go to school. A real school with books and teachers and other children. We can do that. And I want Samuel to have everything he needs. Good clothes, good food, medicine when he's sick." "That too. And I want—" She hesitated. "I want to help other children, like me. Children whose parents can't take care of them, or who don't have parents at all." Elijah looked at her. "What do you mean? There's an orphanage in Cheyenne. I heard Doc Pruitt talking about it. He says the children there don't have enough food or warm clothes, and some of them are sick all the time." Clara's jaw set with determination. "I want to help them." "That's a big undertaking. I know. But we have more money than we need. And Mama always said that blessings are meant to be shared, not hoarded." Elijah thought about Eleanor Dawson, the woman he'd never met, but had come to know through her daughter. A woman who had died protecting her children. A woman who had raised a girl capable of compassion even after everything she'd suffered. "All right," he said. "We'll talk to Doc Pruitt, see what needs to be done." Clara's face lit up. "Really?" "Really. But Clara, there's something else we need to discuss." "What?" "The water rights agreement includes a yearly payment, royalties for as long as the railroad uses Willow Creek. That money will keep coming for decades, maybe longer." "How much?" "Enough to do a lot of good if we're smart about it." Clara was quiet for a moment, processing. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Mama died because of those water rights. People lied and killed and hurt children because of them. She looked at Elijah. Maybe the best way to honor her is to use that money to help people instead of hurt them. I think your mama would agree with that. Then that's what we'll do. Clara's hand found his in the darkness. We'll build something good out of something terrible. That's how you make the darkness worth it. Elijah squeezed her hand. When did you get so wise? I've had good teachers. Summer brought changes to the ranch. New buildings went up. A proper schoolroom where Clara could study with a tutor Elijah had hired from Denver. A bigger kitchen where Consuela could feed the growing household. An addition to the main house with separate bedrooms for both children. Workers came and went, transforming the solitary ranch into something that looked more like a small community. Elijah found himself with responsibilities he hadn't anticipated. Payroll, supplies, decisions that affected more than just himself. He should have hated it. For 15 years, he'd craved solitude. Needed it like other men needed whiskey or tobacco. But somehow, he didn't miss it at all. You're different, Doc Pruitt observed one afternoon during his weekly visit to check on Clara's leg. I hardly recognize you. Different how? Happier. More alive. The old physician smiled. Those children are good for you. They're good for everyone. That's true. Clara's been helping Maria Patterson at the boarding house. Did you know that teaching the younger children to read and write? She mentioned something about it. She's got a gift for it. Natural teacher. Doc Pruitt finished his examination and pronounced Clara's leg fully healed. Have you thought about what you're going to do when she's older? She's too smart for just ranch work. Elijah had thought about it. Late at night when the house was quiet and his mind wouldn't rest. He'd thought about what Clara could become if she was given the right opportunities. The doors that education could open. The difference she could make in the world. I'm going to send her to school, he said. A proper school, the best one in the territory. That'll cost a fortune. We've got a fortune. Doc Pruitt nodded slowly. And after school, whatever she wants. College if she's interested. Law school if she's got the fire for it. Elijah looked out the window to where Clara was playing with Samuel in the yard. She wants to help children, protect them from people like Blackwood. That takes education, training, resources. You're thinking about building something that lasts beyond your lifetime. I'm thinking about giving her the tools to build whatever she wants. Clara chose law. She announced it at dinner one autumn evening, her face serious and determined. She was 10 years old, and she'd been studying with her tutor for 6 months. In that time, she'd devoured every book in the house and sent to Denver for more. I want to be a lawyer, she said. Like the ones at Mr. Blackwood's trial, but better. Better how? I want to help people who can't help themselves, children like me and Samuel, women like Mama. Her chin lifted. I want to make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else. Elijah thought about the trial. About Clara on the witness stand 9 years old, and facing down the man who had murdered her mother. About the way she'd spoken truth to power without flinching. You'd be good at it, he said. You think so? I know so. You're smart, you're brave, and you've got a sense of justice that most adults never develop. He smiled. Wyoming's going to need lawyers like you. Wyoming doesn't let women be lawyers. Not yet. But things change. They're already talking about it back east. Elijah reached across the table and took her hand. By the time you're old enough to practice the law might be different. And if it's not, you'll change it. Clara's eyes shone. You really believe that? I believe in you. That's the same thing. Consuela brought out dessert, a special cake she'd made to celebrate the successful harvest. Samuel, now walking confidently and talking in full sentences, demanded the biggest piece. Samuel, don't be greedy, Clara chided, but I want it. Wanting something doesn't mean you get to have it. Why not? Because life doesn't work that way. Elijah watched the exchange with amusement. Clara had become a natural big sister, balancing firmness with affection in a way that came easier to her than it had to anyone he'd ever known. "Clara's right," he said. "We share in this family. Equal pieces for everyone." Samuel pouted, but accepted his portion without further argument. Clara caught Elijah's eye and grinned. Family. The word had meant nothing to him for 15 years. Now it meant everything. Winter came again, bringing with it memories of the blizzard that had changed everything. On the anniversary of the night Elijah had found Clara in the snow, he woke before dawn and stood at the kitchen window watching the darkness. Behind him he heard soft footsteps. "You couldn't sleep either," Clara said. "No." She came to stand beside him. In the past year she'd grown several inches. Her face had lost some of its childish roundness, revealing the strong bones underneath. She was going to be beautiful, he realized, like her mother. "I keep thinking about that night," she said quietly. "How cold it was. How scared I was." She paused. "How close we came to dying." "I think about it too." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found us?" Elijah had wondered. Late at night, in his darkest moments, he'd imagined the alternatives. Clara and Samuel freezing to death in the snow. Blackwood getting away with murder. The water rights falling into the hands of men who would use them to hurt people. But that wasn't what had happened. "I try not to," he said. "What matters is that I did find you. We're here. We're alive. We're together." Clara leaned against his arm. "Mama used to say that God puts people in our paths for a reason, that there are no coincidences, only providence." "Do you believe that?" "I didn't used to. After she died, I thought God had abandoned us." Clara was quiet for a moment. "But then you found us. A man who'd lost his own daughter riding fence in a blizzard. What are the odds of that?" "Pretty slim." "Exactly. So maybe Mama was right. Maybe it was providence." She looked up at him. "Maybe we were meant to find each other." Elijah thought about Sarah, about Hannah, about 15 years of loneliness that had felt like a prison sentence without end. "Maybe we were," he said. They stood together in silence as the sun began to rise, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of pink and gold. A new day. A new year. A new beginning. "Elijah." "Yeah. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for giving me a reason not to." Clara hugged him tight. He hugged her back, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest. This child who had become his daughter. This stranger who had become his family. "I love you," she whispered. The words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but hold her and try not to cry. "I love you too," he finally managed. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone again." They stayed like that until the sun was fully up and the smell of Consuela's breakfast began drifting through the house. The years that followed were the happiest of Elijah's life. He watched Clara grow from a traumatized child into a confident young woman. She graduated from her tutoring at 14, top of her class, and was accepted into a preparatory academy in Denver. At 17, she enrolled in law school, one of the first women in Wyoming Territory to do so. Samuel grew too from a toddler into a strong, curious boy who followed Elijah everywhere on the ranch. He showed no interest in law or politics, preferring the practical work of managing cattle and maintaining land. By the time he was 12, he could ride better than men twice his age. "He's going to be a rancher," Consuela observed one summer afternoon watching Samuel rope a calf with practiced efficiency. "Just like you." "Just like his grandfather," Elijah corrected. "Abraham Dawson built his ranch from nothing. Samuel's got his blood. And yours. You're his father now, whether the blood matches or not." Father. Elijah had never expected to hear that word again, had never expected to be one. But Samuel called him Pa, and Clara called him the same, and somewhere along the way, the title had become as natural as breathing. Clara came home from law school for Christmas the year she turned 20. She'd changed since he'd seen her last, carrying herself with a new confidence that spoke of hard work and success. "I passed the bar," she announced over dinner. "Top scores in my class." Elijah felt pride swell in his chest. "I knew you would. I had good teachers." Clara smiled. "And I've been offered a position with a firm in Cheyenne. They handle cases for women and children, custody disputes, abuse cases. Exactly what I always wanted to do." "Are you going to take it?" "I want to, but—" She hesitated. "I wanted to talk to you first. Make sure you're all right with me staying in Cheyenne." "Clara, you're a grown woman. You don't need my permission." "I know, but I need your blessing." Her eyes met his. "I spent so many years being afraid of the future. Now I have a chance to build something good. But I don't want to do it if it means leaving you behind." Elijah reached across the table and took her hand. The same hand he'd held while Doc Pruitt set her broken leg. The same hand she'd slipped into his on countless walks along the fence line. "You could never leave me behind," he said. "You carry me with you, just like you carry your mother. That's what family means." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Did you doubt it?" "No, but I needed to hear it." Samuel, now 15 and nearly as tall as Elijah, spoke up from his end of the table. "Does this mean I get Clara's room?" The tension broke into laughter. Clara threw a dinner roll at her brother's head. He caught it and took a bite. "Some things never change," Consuela said, shaking her head. "Sibling rivalry is eternal." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Elijah replied. Clara moved to Cheyenne in the spring. She came home often bringing stories of her cases and the lives she was helping to change. Women escaping violent husbands, children removed from dangerous homes, orphans finding families. With each visit, Elijah saw more of Eleanor in her, the same fierce protectiveness, the same unwavering sense of justice. "Mama would be so proud of you," he told her one afternoon. They were standing at Eleanor's grave where Clara had placed fresh flowers. It was a ritual she maintained no matter how busy her work became. "I think about her every day," Clara said. "When I'm in court arguing for a child's safety, I imagine her watching, cheering me on." "She is. I'm sure of it." "Do you think she knows that we're okay?" "I think she knew before she died. That's why she told you to find me." Elijah looked at the headstone at the name carved in weathered granite. "She trusted me to protect you. I hope I've lived up to that trust." "You've done more than protect us." Clara slipped her arm through his. "You've given us a life, a future, a family." She paused. "You saved us, Elijah, not just from the blizzard, from everything that came after. You saved me too. You know that, right?" Clara nodded slowly. "I know. The greatest rescues are mutual. That's what you taught me." They stood together in the spring sunshine, honoring the dead and celebrating the living. Two people who had found each other in the darkest moment and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The water gauge stick still hung above the fireplace in the Hartwell ranch house. Every spring, when the snow melted and Willow Creek ran high, Elijah and Samuel would take it down and walk to the creek bed. Together, they would measure the water level and carve a new notch, adding their mark to the generations of marks that came before. 1861. Samuel read one year tracing the oldest notch with his finger. That's when Great-Grandpa Abraham filed the claim. With my grandfather Ezra, they did it together. And now we do it together. That's right. Elijah handed the stick to Samuel. Your turn to make the mark. Samuel carved the new notch with careful precision. When he was finished, he held up the stick to examine his work. It's just a piece of wood, he said. But it means so much. It means everything. It's proof that we were here, that we endured, that the things we build can outlast us. Elijah put his hand on Samuel's shoulder. Someday you'll pass this stick to your own children, and they'll pass it to theirs. That's how legacies work. What if I don't have children? Then you'll pass it to someone else who matters. Family isn't just blood, Samuel. It's the people you choose. Elijah smiled. Your sister taught me that. Samuel returned the smile. She taught me too. They walked back to the house together, the water gauge stick carried carefully between them. Behind them, Willow Creek sparkled in the afternoon sun, its waters flowing freely across the land that 3 families had fought to protect. Clara came home for Elijah's 70th birthday. She was 30 now, a respected lawyer with a reputation that reached far beyond Wyoming. She'd argued cases before the Territorial Supreme Court. She'd helped draft legislation protecting children from abuse. She'd built the life she'd dreamed of on that winter night when she'd crawled through the snow with her baby brother in her arms. Samuel was there too, with his wife and 2 young children. He'd taken over the ranch operations years ago, freeing Elijah to spend his days reading and resting and spoiling his grandchildren. Speech, Clara called out as the family gathered around the birthday cake Consuela had baked. Papa has to give a speech. I'm too old for speeches. You're never too old for speeches, you taught me that. Elijah looked around the table at the faces of his family. Clara strong and beautiful and fierce. Samuel steady and reliable and kind. Their spouses, their children. Consuela silver-haired now, but still sharp as a tack. 20 years ago, he'd been a man with nothing. A hollow shell going through the motions of living. He'd built walls around his heart so high that he'd forgotten what sunlight felt like. Then a little girl had crawled out of a blizzard and knocked those walls down forever. I don't have a speech, he said, but I have a story. Tell us. Samuel's children chorused. All right. Elijah settled back in his chair. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he had lost everything. His wife, his daughter, his reason for living. He spent 15 years alone convincing himself that he was better off that way. That's sad, Samuel's daughter said. It was sad, very sad. But then one night in the middle of the worst blizzard he'd ever seen, that man found 2 children in the snow. A little girl with a broken leg and a baby boy who was barely breathing. That's Aunt Clara and Papa. That's right. The man didn't know it then, but those children were about to change everything. They were going to teach him that it's never too late to start over. That love isn't a weakness, it's a strength. That the greatest rescues are mutual. Clara's eyes were glistening. Samuel's wife was dabbing at her face with a napkin. The man thought he was saving those children. Elijah continued. But really, they were saving him. They gave him a reason to wake up in the morning, a reason to fight, a reason to hope. He paused, looking at each face around the table. I don't know what I did to deserve you, any of you. But I thank God every day that I was riding fence that night, that I heard a baby crying in the wind, that I found the courage to open my heart again. We're the lucky ones, Clara said softly. You chose us. You fought for us. You gave us a home when we had nothing. We chose each other. That's what family means. Samuel raised his glass. To family. To family. Everyone echoed. They ate cake and told stories and laughed until the candles burned down to nothing. When the children fell asleep and the adults grew quiet, Clara came to sit beside Elijah on the porch. Remember what you told me? She asked. That first night when Doc Pruitt was setting my leg? I told you a lot of things that night. You told me to stay with you. Both of us. You said it over and over while you were riding back to the ranch. Elijah remembered. The weight of 2 children in his arms. The terror in his heart. The words spilling out of him like a prayer. You heard that. I was fading in and out, but I heard your voice. It was the first thing I'd heard in months that made me feel safe. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. I stayed with you, Papa. We both did. And you stayed with us. I always will. I know. They sat together in the darkness, watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars that had witnessed a man finding 2 children in the snow. The same stars that had watched them become a family. Papa. Yeah. Thank you for everything. Thank you for letting me be your father. Clara smiled. I didn't let you. I chose you. There's a difference. Yeah. Elijah put his arm around her. There is. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of spring flowers and new grass. Somewhere in the distance, Willow Creek rushed toward the valley, its waters carving their ancient path through the land. 20 years ago, Elijah Hartwell had been a man with nothing to live for. Now, he had everything. A daughter who had become a warrior for justice. A son who would carry on the family legacy. Grandchildren who would grow up knowing they were loved. And the memory of a winter night when a little girl with a broken leg had crawled out of a blizzard and taught him that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. The greatest rescues are always mutual. That was the truth Clara's mother had understood. The truth Elijah had learned in the snow. The truth that had transformed two broken souls into something whole and beautiful and lasting. Some families are born, others are forged in fire and ice and desperate hope. But in the end, the love is the same. And love, as Elijah Hartwell had finally learned, is the only legacy that truly matters.